Good morning, Laura.
Good morning.
Are you ready to talk about your great article from Forbes about the 8 most expensive legal mistakes entrepreneurs make?
Yes. Yep, I'm ready to go.
All right. So look, yes, we entrepreneurs, we're generally leaner and meaner than those big corporations, right?
Right.
But don't make the mistake of cutting corners just to save a few pennies on legal advice, such as do-it-yourself forms and Googling the law yourself. I mean, because legal mistakes, as you write, have a tendency to be very expensive. So Laura, my friend and colleague and fellow attorney, she's joining us to share your tips, your 8 tips on how to avoid these expensive legal mistakes, specifically for entrepreneurs. So Laura, can we jump into number one? The first tip that you give to avoid choosing the wrong business entity.
Yeah, so there are different ways to structure your business, right? Whether it's an LLC or a sole proprietorship or an S Corp or a C Corp. And each one of these structures has various pros and cons and different ways of being treated tax-wise. And you could be losing out on important tax benefits if you set up your business under the wrong entity or don't set it up under an entity at all. And one of the other disadvantages is you could put your own personal assets at risk for actions of the business. And of course, you don't want that. If your business is, you don't want, your own personal assets to be subject to risk because of something that happened in your business. You want to keep those protected. So we recommend that you work with a lawyer to figure out which of these entities makes the most sense for you at that time in your business, and then make sure that it gets set up properly.
So I have my own story, my own personal story on how I made my own mistake in this area. So just that just shows that we're all prone to these mistakes, even the so-called experts such as us. So I had an LLC for many years for my law practice. And I knew for many of those years, I should be doing an S corp election. I should be doing an S corp election. And for those of you who don't know, that's just a different way of being treated for tax purposes. And bottom line is, because I procrastinated, even though I knew what I was supposed to be doing, for maybe 3 or 4 years, I was way overpaying on something called self-employment tax. And my laziness or my procrastination probably cost me several thousands of dollars. So don't do that, please.
Yeah, and that's kind of the main point of each one of these bullet points is that, it can be hard to see how legal things translate into, ROI, or how does it really hit you in the wallet if you make one of these mistakes.
Yeah.
But each of these mistakes can and probably will cost you in the long run. So you are hurting yourself where you don't want to be hurting yourself in your wallet by not managing these things properly.
For sure. Let's move on to number 2. Second mistake to avoid, not documenting agreements.
Right. So the problem here is that oral agreements, while often binding, they can be hard to remember down the road, what was said, what was decided, what was agreed upon. So if there's any disagreement whatsoever down the road about what was decided, and you don't have it in writing, you're going to have to find a way to untangle that. And that can be really expensive. So this can be avoided just by having simple agreements in place. They don't have to be complicated, but you should name each of the parties' obligations and responsibilities, talk about what will happen, how you can terminate the agreement. It doesn't have to be complicated, but you just want to get it in writing so that down the road you have a documented agreement that specifies what was decided upon.
I mean, this, I don't know about you, Laura, but lately I'm realizing more and more how fallible our human memory is. So,
Yeah.
I mean, have you ever just talked to somebody and said, "Hey, I thought we were supposed to meet next Tuesday," and they say, "No, it was next Wednesday," and you're just adamant that it was Tuesday, and then you look at the text chain on your phone, and you're dead wrong. You're completely wrong, but
Right.
you were so certain it was the other
Right.
day, right? I mean, it happens to all
Yeah,
of
that's
us.
the
Yeah.
thing. It happens to all of us. And even two very well-meaning people can sincerely disagree on what was said, just like you said.
Yeah.
So this doesn't come from, bad intentions or anything. You could really have two people who genuinely believe in the different things were decided. So it can all be fixed by getting it in writing, because again, trying to get an agreement in place afterwards, that's going to be expensive.
Yep. All right. So cool. Moving on to number 3. Tell us about why running afoul of employment laws is a big mistake we should try to avoid.
Yeah, so employment laws are pretty complex and they're always changing. Each state has their own specific laws. So what applies in New York may not apply in New Jersey or California. Each state has their own rules. And then there are federal rules that all the 50 states have to follow. And there can be severe penalties for not following the rules. And not knowing that the rule existed is not an excuse, right? So from things like classifying employees as independent contractors to not providing harassment and discrimination training to managers, to terminating employees for taking family or medical leave. These are all things that you shouldn't be doing. So you want to check with a local attorney on this because, like I said, many of these laws are state specific. And the penalties for making a mistake can be pretty high.
So I have two personal points to share on this. Number one, payroll taxes are such a pain. if once you start hiring your staff, either get a bookkeeper or use something like, I use Intuit, which is the company that makes QuickBooks. I use their online payroll software, and they make it so much easier, or so relatively easy compared to trying to do it yourself. And it can become such a mess. And just to give you an example of how Byzantine the employment laws are, at least here in New York. I mean, this is an absurd example, I think. Laura, you tell me, am I crazy here? So when I owned an H&R Block out in Queens, I had an employee who was working for me, who was on my payroll, who I was paying every week. But she filed for unemployment while she was working for me, and I was paying her both unemployment and on payroll. And I couldn't figure out how to undo it.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it was so frustrating.
What a mess.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great example.
I mean, I don't know what the conclusion is on that point, but just the laws can be very complicated and hard to understand.
Yeah, and they're everything from, like you said, payroll to taxes to, sexual discrimination laws to, it just runs the gamut, right? Yep. And like I said, the laws are always changing. And so it's just way more than you would ever even want to be able to know on your own. Like you said, it's better to just outsource that. A bookkeeper, a CPA, a lawyer, they're all going to keep you up to date on what you should and shouldn't be doing. And it's worth the expense.
Cool, for sure. All right, number 4. Number 4 mistake we should try to avoid, all of us entrepreneurs. Don't start a competing business while you're still employed.
You're right. And see, this one seems sort of common sense.
A little bit, right?
A little bit, right? Yeah. The main thing here is just to keep in mind, you're allowed to start a competing business after you leave your company, but you want to make sure that you're abiding by any non-compete agreements that you may have signed when you first started at your job. If you're not sure if you have a non-compete or how to interpret your non-compete, ask a lawyer, because it's really worth the expense to make sure you're doing things by the book, like we said, and you're not going to have to pay to defend yourself in a lawsuit later on. Obviously, that just isn't worth the expense. That can actually be so expensive it puts you out of business. Right. Any lawsuit is going to be really expensive, obviously. So again, just make sure that you're not running afoul of any non-compete agreements that you may have signed.
Cool. I mean, that makes sense. All right. Yep. Number 5. Don't forget to protect your intellectual property, yeah?
Yep. Yeah, so intellectual property is things like trademarks and patents and copyright. A lot of people think that they don't have intellectual property, but for example, if you have a website, you have intellectual property. So the logo, the copy, all of that is your property and your thoughts, and you want to make sure that all of that is protected. So again, this is another complex area of law, so it's worth it to work with a lawyer to navigate the rules. But this is just an area that you don't want to miss out on, because it could be expensive, and you may not be using the intellectual property you do have to its full advantage as well. So again, proactively addressing these things can end up being very financially beneficial in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, if you watch Gary Vee or any of the other influencers out and about these days, you probably understand that content is king. And if you're going to spend a lot, I mean, you might think, oh, I don't own any copyrights or trademarks, but if you're doing content marketing, if you're writing blog posts, if you're posting stuff on your YouTube or social, you are generating intellectual property. And if you're going to go to the effort and the expense of doing all this, you might as well own it, right? You might as well make sure you own it.
Right. Yeah. That's another great example. You need a logo. So you work with someone, across seas to develop a logo for you. And you may not know that it's possible that logo, the designer doesn't give you the right to own, that property. Maybe in the long run, they actually own it. So, right. If you're working with other people to help you develop content, you want to make sure that you end up actually owning what was created at the end.
Totally agree. All right, moving on to number 6. Make sure you have a will or trust if you're an entrepreneur. Why is that so important, Laura?
Yeah, so all small business owners need an estate plan. And by estate plan, I mean a will or a trust. Now, everybody needs an estate plan in general, but I won't go off onto that tangent. But especially small business owners, at a minimum, you need a will or a trust, and an attorney can help you learn the difference between the two. To name beneficiaries for your assets, you should have a healthcare proxy and a financial power of attorney. And these are where you name someone to make decisions about your healthcare and your finances if you're disabled or you're incapacitated and you can't manage your own healthcare or your own assets, including your business. The person you name as your financial power of attorney will be able to manage your business for you if you can't manage it yourself, be able to make asset decisions and financial decisions. So that's really important. Also, succession planning is important for small business owners. What happens if you pass away? Do you want your business to continue on? Is your family dependent on this business? And if something happens to you, then that revenue and income is going to be gone. So these are all things that you want to discuss with a lawyer to make sure that everything doesn't fall apart if you die or become incapacitated, and also to make sure that the goals that you have with your business are aligned with your estate plan to make sure that it's all seamless.
I mean, if you have more than one, if you're a small business owner with more than one owner, if you have a partner or partners, I like to think of the key man insurance and the buy-sell agreements as sort of the estate plan for the business, because you want to plan not only if you die, but what happens if your partner dies, right? Do you necessarily want to become partners with his wife or his surviving wife or his surviving kids? I mean, there's a lot of forks in the road you need to think about, or your lawyer will help you think about when you do your succession planning for the business, not just for the individuals who own the business, yeah?
Right, yeah. So if you're in partnership with someone and, they pass away and they've left their half of the business to their spouse, just like you said, you're actually now going to be in business with someone's spouse who may or may not have any, may not be someone that you want to be in partnership with. So again, a lawyer will help you, will help you just kind of look down the road and see what could happen, like you said, in certain circumstances. And if you don't like how things would unfold, then you can get documents in place that will change that.
Bingo. All right. Number 7. Make sure this is a skill that actually applies to a lot of areas of life, but yeah, it certainly applies here. Make sure you know what you don't know. How does that work here, Laura?
Yeah, so the biggest traps, I think, for entrepreneurs to look out for are the ones that you don't even know about. And unfortunately, not knowing what the rules were, what the law was in a certain circumstance is just not an excuse a court's going to accept if you do get in trouble. So, like I said, there's so much to know, from employment laws to having a good estate plan, not one that you did yourself online, but really working with an attorney to make sure you're addressing all the things that you're not thinking about. That's another good area of where you don't know what you don't know with estate planning. I see that all the time with my clients. So, and it's not surprising because it's a very complicated area. But again, and then how to manage team members. there's just so much to know when you're running a business, and there's just no reason that you should even attempt to begin, to learn everything, because what you should be doing is spending your time doing what you do best, which is running your business. And I think any successful business owner, entrepreneur will tell you, outsource to the experts. It doesn't make sense for you to be spending time trying to figure out how to do your own taxes just to save a little bit of money. You might save some money, I suppose on, TurboTax is cheaper than a CPA.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you that CPA will have found a lot more deductions, and probably will, the result will be better. And the result will be totally legal as well, right? It'll be right. It'll be correct. So it just isn't worth it to try to do all these things yourself.
For sure. All right. Great advice, Laura. And, I hope everyone's writing these down. This is good stuff. Otherwise, you can check out the article. I think it's currently on Forbes.com. And the eighth and final, most expensive legal mistake entrepreneurs should try to avoid is not having a good advisory team. All right. Let's wrap it up and tell us about this one, Laura.
Yeah, so this is something that sounds expensive, right? You might think, I just opened my business and it's just me and I can't afford a team of advisors. That just sounds like something that you should put off until you're making a lot of money. Sure. Again, this can end up costing you more in the long run, because not only can various advisors keep you from running afoul of the law, but they can help you manage your business in a way that ultimately makes you more money. So, for example, working with a banker to have a line of credit lined up instead of racking up a bunch of debt on your credit cards, which is not uncommon when people start a business. They don't realize how expensive it's going to be. So that's one great example of something that an expert can help you with. Working with a CPA to make sure you take advantage of all of the deductions on your taxes is going to save you money. Having a bookkeeper to keep track of your revenue and your expenses so you can really know and understand the numbers of your business, that's going to help you make better decisions so you can make more money. And of course, you want to work with a lawyer to manage all the things that we've been talking about throughout this podcast.
So, this is great advice just in so many walks of life. Just from my personal business as a professional executor, over the years, one of the most valuable things I've done and one of the greatest values I bring to the families that I serve as executor is I have a built-out team. If there's somebody who won't leave the family home that we're trying to sell, I have experienced eviction attorneys who are familiar with how to do it in an estate setting. If there's a tax issue, or if there's income tax problems that we want to learn about, we work with CPAs who are very familiar with estates and people who have passed away, which is a little unique compared to somebody who's just doing your run-of-the-mill 1040 every year. So yeah, just building out a team and surrounding yourself with just really smart people and great people. It's just good advice overall, wouldn't you say?
Yes, it's great advice. It's great advice. And again, in the long run is going to save you money. It really will. Not just from the perspective of you won't be making mistakes, but, all of these advisors can help you proactively run your business. And that's invaluable.
So Laura, can you share with us a little bit about how your practice really helps people implement these 8 great tips?
Yeah, so we have what we call an outsourced general counsel service within our law firm. So I specialize in both estate planning and business law, and I like to work with small business owners, entrepreneurs. And these two areas are very related, so it makes sense to specialize in both. And the things that I would recommend, if you're thinking that you'd like to work with an attorney on these things, I would recommend finding a lawyer who has their own business. So maybe a sole practitioner or someone who's an entrepreneur on the side, because so much of what you learn in law school it applies, but you want to work with someone who's been in the trenches and they've got their own business themselves, so they really know what it's like to be running a business.
Totally agree.
So we've got these outsourced general counsel packages. And what it means is, we know that you can't afford to have a lawyer on staff yet. Maybe someday you will. Mm-hmm. But right now, it just doesn't make any sense, to do anything like that. And we also know that small business owners need to budget for legal expenses, and they don't want to be constantly worried about, how much is your legal bill going to be that month. That's just a huge source of stress, especially when the attorney is billing by the hour. So we offer general counsel packages that they are either a fixed number of hours that we work together each month, or a fixed number of specific tasks that we'll do for you, all agreed upon for a flat monthly fee. So what this means is you can start to chip away at all of the issues we've been discussing, and we would sit down and go over your specific business and your concerns without breaking the budget or worrying your bill is going to be very high at the end of the month, because you will have determined what the monthly fee is. And we offer these packages at varying rates depending on where you are in your business. And the first step would be for you to come in for a consultation where we do sort of a little mini audit of your business, right? So we would look at your legal and financial and insurance and tax systems and determine the biggest areas of risk for you, and then devise a plan for attacking those areas proactively going forward.
So Laura, I'll make sure to add your info in the show notes, but just so for any listeners, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so listeners are welcome to email me directly. My email is laura@lauraecowanlaw.com. So I'll spell that. It's LAURA@LAURAECOWAN law.com. Kind of a long email. And I'm presuming you'll put that in the podcast as well.
For sure.
You're also welcome to call my office. The number is 855-914-1944. And we'll get you on the calendar just to come in for an audit of your current business and make a decision about whether it makes sense for us to move forward or not.
Awesome. Laura, that's all I have. Is there anything else you wanted to chat about before we sign off here?
No, I think that's it. I hope to meet some of your listeners in the future.
Very cool, Laura. Thanks again for your 8 most expensive legal mistakes that entrepreneurs make. Also in Forbes.com. Reach out to Laura, please. I work with her all the time, mostly on estate matters. Definitely, we've done small business stuff together. So if you have anything like that, give her a call. Otherwise, we'll talk to you next time. Thank you, Laura, and see you soon.
Bye.
Bye now.